and welcome back to Walk the Cinema podcast. Today we are going to be focusing on some leading ladies of kind of classic Hollywood. We picked 3 women that we thought really best represented this time in Hollywood, and we're going to go kind of chronological, the movies that we picked and kind of when their stardom started to rise. So our first person that we're going to kind of be talking about and the movie that we're going to be talking about is All About Eve, starring Bette Davis. So All About Eve is a 1950s American drama film that was written by Mankiewicz, the brother of the Citizen Kane Mankiewicz.
Yes.
So kind of interesting.
This is Joseph Mankiewicz, the brother of Herman.
Yes.
Both clearly wrote a great movie at one point, because I think this is one of the all-time great movies.
Yeah, this movie is actually amazing. I really liked it. And we picked Bette Davis as like our first person to kind of focus on, is because she is a pretty well-known name in Hollywood. She
was a powerhouse. 10 Oscar nominations for acting is incredible.
Yeah, and both of the she had 10 nominations, but she only won 2 of those nominations, and both of those I think were roles that she did in the 1930s. But this movie came out in 1950, so she is a little bit more like aged in Hollywood. And this movie is kind of about an aging Broadway star who is very highly regarded, but she's playing roles that are meant for younger actresses, but just aren't as powerful, aren't as they don't have as strong of a presence yet.
A lot of the first part of the movie, where we don't know if Eve is a villain or not yet, is Margot, the Bette Davis character, being paranoid about her age and being replaced because she's aging. Which, I don't know if in real life she was also worried about that, but she was the age that she could be replaced by younger stars, because Marilyn Monroe was in this movie, and she would go on to be an even bigger star. So it kind of makes sense with like real life that her age could be an issue from now on. Yeah.
And both of the women that are in this movie, we focused on Bette Davis. Like, this is the reason why we chose this movie.
Right.
But even Anne Baxter, who plays Eve Harrington, the younger fan who kind of wiggles her way in to Margot's life, she is also an incredible presence. Like, you do kind of believe that she's this naive type of girl at the beginning, and then all of a sudden she's not. She's evil. She's manipulative, and it makes you hate her. Like, I had genuine hate towards her.
That's why I think this movie works the best without you knowing what you're getting yourself into. Because she legitimately passes as a fan. Like, she does. Only really one person sees through it in the beginning, and then she becomes like one of the biggest evil characters in movie history. I think she's listed often as a big antagonist, like lists of worst villains in movie history.
Yeah, or like best villains, like love to hate type villains, because she is a very like lovable, like hateful character. And I was cheering during her little kind of downfall moment where it's kind of played back on her, but I really enjoyed that, actually. I was really cheering for her just absolute downfall. But, you know, Bette Davis, I'd say this is probably like a midpoint in her career. She was in her 40s, I believe, at this point. And she, you know, went on to do other movies such as Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Another all-time great, which was like 10 years after this. So longevity.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that movie a lot, and I love this one a lot. Just, she's done so many good movies. And I mean, it shows in her Oscar nominations, but it's more than that.
Yeah.
It's the significance that they still hold.
Yeah. And the movie did win the Best Picture for the year it was nominated, and it had, I think it was 14 nominations, something like that, but it only won 6, but it did result in 2 Best Actress nominations for Bette Davis and Anne Baxter, and 2 Supporting Actress nominations with the women who played the friend who's the wife of the playwright. I can't remember her name. Karen, yes, Karen, and Birdie, who was like her stage or her helper, I guess, getting ready for.
She's not there for very long.
No,
but she is a noticeable presence.
Yeah,
which I guess can get you a nomination. We saw that recently with The Fablesman getting a nomination for an actor that's in it for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So
I guess it may be, stage presence. I don't know much about Thelma Ritter, to be honest, so I don't know what the importance of her was at the time, but, it won Best Picture, like I said, Best Director for Mankiewicz, Best Supporting Actor for George Sanders, who played the kind of secondary villain, I guess. He writes poorly about Margot and tries to...
He's a critic. He's the one that actually starts off the movie. And he's speaking leading up to why we're here for Eve, but also he's so self-important from the get-go, where he says, I'm a critic, I'm very important to theater, and whatever this man hosting the award is saying doesn't matter. Listen to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's a villain from the beginning.
Yeah. And he is I think it's kind of interesting that he won an Oscar for this, which I don't think he did poorly, but I just think with all the women that were present in this film that also got nominated, it's funny to me a little bit that he's the one out of all of these kind of, I would say, powerhouse performances that ended up getting an acting win for the movie.
I think more than the performances, I think that the writing and directing were probably the most important aspects, even above the performances. And maybe that's why, this isn't the 50s, right? So we don't know what people were thinking, but I'm pretty sure that they're more focused on the writing, directing here. So maybe that's why the women ended up being just nominated and not winning.
Yeah. I don't know, but I really enjoyed Bette Davis. Like, she was really captivating to watch. And I think that she may not be the most recognizable name, I think, to the general public. I think that she is not necessarily someone people think of when you think of classic Hollywood. Like, if you're just asking somebody, I think our next person that we're going to talk about is usually someone that gets brought up more. But, I think people, when you say her name, they think of the song, The Bette Davis Eyes, which is interesting, but they may not know who she is. But she, I'd say, very much is an icon to Hollywood, and she was very important from like the 30s all the way up until the 70s. So she definitely made a name for herself, and this movie was such a pivotal part, I think, in her career. And it was really interesting, and I really enjoyed this movie. It wasn't on my radar, I would say, before we started doing kind of our thematic episodes, but I'm glad you suggested it, because you're the one that came up with the idea to do it.
It's a really good movie. It's a really good performance. It's super well directed. It's probably one of the best screenplays in movies. So both of the Mankiewicz wrote this and Citizen Kane, 2 of the best screenplays ever, period. So talented family, I guess, and great movie.
Agreed. And like you said before, Marilyn Monroe was in this movie. She was a very small part where she plays this woman named Claudia.
But she had a screen impact. You could see the screen impact that she had.
Sure, yeah. But she wasn't there for very long. She didn't make like a huge impression, but she is the next woman that we're going to be talking about, which we chose the movie Some Like It Hot. And I would say that, to be fair, I really did not know what the plot line of Some Like It Hot was when we...
I didn't either.
Kind of decided to do this. And so I don't know. When I think of Some Like It Hot, I do think of Marilyn Monroe.
Right. She's the main figure in the poster. She's kind of the reason people are going to watch this. Maybe Billy Wilder, right? They're watching all the Billy Wilders or
Sure.
all the movies in the 250 lists here and there. The sound and whatever lists. But, yeah, I think of Monroe when I think of this movie.
Which kind of made me a little bit confused when she wasn't necessarily the main character. So
No.
Some Like It Hot came out in 1959. It's a crime comedy that was directed, written, and produced by Billy Wilder. And it stars Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis, and Jack Lemmon. Who Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon, I'd say, are more of the main characters of
Especially
this
Jack
film.
Lemmon.
Yeah. And that was something that I was kind of shocked by. But I think that this movie was kind of important in terms of, like, this is the movie I do associate Marilyn Monroe with. Like, it is, her name is, like, the top name in the poster. And I don't know if this was, like, her breakout role. I don't think it was.
I mean, she was involved in other Billy Wilder movies. And I don't know. She's one of those figures that I wasn't there for her uprising.
Yeah.
So I kind of just assumed she was always there.
Yeah, she is kind of like an assuming figure. I'd say she is the most popular person that you think of, like, in terms of the general public, of, like, women in classic Hollywood. Like,
I mean,
think
her
of that time, you think of who's the most well-known woman? Marilyn Monroe.
Well, she did the 70-Year Itch a couple years before this with Billy Wilder. And
Okay, so that was probably...
that was the moment that, you know, the lifting skirt. That's like an iconic image of Marilyn Monroe.
Sure. I think that the image, though, is probably more iconic than, like, the name of the movie. You know, when you ask someone that's like, not that big of a fan of movies or doesn't, like, super care about movie history type thing, and they think of a Marilyn Monroe movie, it's Some Like It Hot. I don't think that the 7-Year Itch really even, like, is that big of a name to the general public.
I think people look at her as kind of a pop figure more than an actress now.
Yeah.
Which is untrue. She was in a lot of movies in the early 50s to this one in the late 50s, and she collaborated with Fritz Lang, one of the best directors of his time. Once he moved to the United States, he collaborated with a lot of big names, and she was one of them, which is, you know, if he picked you to be in his movie, you're an actress, you're not a pop figure.
Yeah.
So she was an actress, but now she's just an icon.
Yeah.
More than anyone else we could mention. I mean, it's one of those names that's just pop culture.
Yeah. Like, she is very entwined with the time. And I think it would have been a disservice had we not picked Marilyn, even though she is kind of like an obvious choice to pick for like classic Hollywood leading ladies. But I think that Some Like It Hot was a pretty good choice. It was interesting. And as soon as we started getting into it, I was like, this is White Chicks. This is the original White Chicks, which was kind of funny. Because, again, I don't think either one of us knew exactly what the plot line was. But basically, it's these two musicians that disguise themselves by dressing up as women to get away from mafia gangsters because they witnessed a crime that they committed. So they go on the road with this all-women band, and they meet Marilyn, who plays the ukulele, I believe, and she sings. And, you know, they kind of become friends as women. And then, you know, one of them tries to date her by pretending to be a billionaire or a millionaire.
I mean, if you're gonna mention White Chicks, obviously, I think this has the same values that makes White Chicks popular to some people. It's easy to laugh at. It's not serious at all, and it's just super easy to understand. It's easy to follow. It's just a good time, but I wouldn't say it's an all-time great movie.
That's fair.
Which a lot of people do regard it as that. But a lot of people regard White Chicks as that, which, I mean, whatever, it's your opinion.
Right.
But I do like this. I did laugh, and it's funny. But I think it's too long.
I agree. It's, what? It was like 2 hours, right? Or maybe a little bit more. I don't remember exactly.
It was just over 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I think that's too long to accomplish what it wants to accomplish.
Yeah, for a crime comedy where it's more heavily focused on the comedy aspect.
It's kind of just goofy, most of it.
Yeah, I think it does teeter on long, but it did get 6 Academy Award nominations, and I think it won 1 or 2. I think it might have just been 1 for Best Costuming Design for Black and White films. Mm-hmm. The other ones that it got nominated for were Best Director, Best Actor for Jack Lemmon. He's the only acting nomination.
To be fair, he was the best one in it. Marilyn Monroe is fine in it. I don't think she stands out in this as much, again, because she's not the lead necessarily.
Right.
But, I mean, she's never got a nomination overall. She's just...
It's one of those things where she is so iconic, but she never got, the big recognition, I guess, for her contributions to Hollywood. Mm-hmm. Like she never really was able to.
And I don't know much about her acting career personally. I just don't watch a lot of her movies, but I don't know. I kind of get the impression she wasn't super taken seriously by critics.
I think that was kind of like her persona, that she wasn't taken very seriously by critics.
She was just a sex symbol and not a serious actress in a lot of people's lives, and to this day.
Yeah,
when people think we had the Blonde movie with Anna Darmus, and people think that it was more about sexualizing Marilyn Monroe than anything else.
Yeah.
So it's never gonna die, apparently.
Yeah.
She's always gonna be just recognized as a sex symbol by some people, and that's just how it is.
Yeah, and I think that anything associated with her name becomes really big, and so I think that people like to exploit that nowadays, where like you have the Kim Kardashian kind of controversy where she wore Marilyn Monroe's iconic dress, and whether or not that should have even been allowed, even if she only wore it for a few seconds, and she went through this rigorous training and diet to get into the dress so that she wouldn't have to alter it. It's still kind of like, I don't know. It's a weird thing to witness.
It raises a lot of questions. It raises questions of morality, questions of, are we interpreting what she was about correctly? Because she kind of, that dress is that she worked to buy it herself. Yeah. And Kim Kardashian did not do that. So that's a morality question that got raised. It's just how we interpret her is very different depending on who you ask. Yeah. But in this movie, she does kind of play a sex symbol. She's at times an object to be looked at by the man that are attracted to her. Mm-hmm.
And she does kind of play the I just want to get married to a rich man type thing. Like that's her kind of goal in this movie. Yep. Even though she doesn't end up doing that, she doesn't care that Jack Lemmon's character isn't rich, that he's a bass player, and she is fine with that,
I tend to look at this movie as just a fun time, and I don't want to analyze it any deeper than that.
I'm sorry, not Jack Lemmon's characters.
Sorry. Yeah.
The saxophone player, Tony Curtis. But yeah, like she falls in love with him and not Jerry. I think the movie's just funny, a fun time. I don't take it too seriously. Maybe that's why I don't think it's one of the all-time greats. But I think if maybe I took it more seriously, I'd find more issues than praise. Yeah, I agree. It's not my favorite movie, and I think this might have been my first Marilyn Monroe movie. Like I've seen other things about her. There was this show back in like the late 2000s, maybe early 2010s, called Smash, that was about a musical being made about Marilyn Monroe's life, and I learned a lot about her life through that when I was growing up. Even though like I think that I knew who she was from a very, very early age. I really don't know how. It's just kind of, she's a pop figure. But I had never like really watched anything of hers until, pretty recently. So this was my first dip into Marilyn Monroe's like acting career. and I will say that I will watch more of her stuff, I think.
Oh, for sure.
Because they are iconic and they are, you know, I'd say important to the history of filmmaking, you know? So was this the greatest thing ever? No. Could we have gone with something else that more focused on her? Sure. But I feel like this is a good, like, representation that even though she is not the main character or the main focus, she's the reason why people still watch it, yep. I think. So,
like,
you know.
Like, maybe 75%.
Yeah, I'd say
and
so.
And then, like, Billy Wilder has some to do with it. Jack Lemmon, maybe.
But I'd say that it's 90%.
She's the recognizable figure in this for most people, yeah, for sure. But moving on from this movie, we're going to go into maybe my least favorite movie we picked, but my favorite actress we picked.
Yes.
My favorite, at least screen present, Audrey Hepburn.
Yes.
In Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yes. And I feel like Breakfast at Tiffany's is probably one of, if not her most recognizable films. I always think of the song that I can't think of the name of or who actually sings it, but you know
the lyrics and the tune are stuck in your head sometimes. Yeah.
But this movie came out in 1961 and it's a romantic comedy that was directed by Blake Edwards, and it was, I think, adapted from a novella, but basically it's about this woman who is a socialite, I guess, or trying to be a socialite, and you know, she kind of uses men to get what she wants, and she meets a man that's kind of doing the same thing, kind of, where he uses a particular woman to kind of fund his lifestyle, right, by keeping her company and stuff.
I will give to this movie that it kept me on my toes more than I thought it would.
Yeah.
This is one of those movies you always hear about, but you never watch, or at least I didn't until now.
Yeah, I agree.
I've seen a lot of Audrey Hepburn, but just not Breakfast at Tiffany's, and I always think that her presence is so, like,
captivating.
It glues you to the screen.
Yeah.
Even if the movie's not great. And it did here it did that. But the movie has twists that also kept me guessing. But then I thought they didn't pay out too great.
I agree. I think that this movie is just kind of okay, and I had a lot of bigger expectations for just the name itself, Breakfast at Tiffany's. You know, like, that is a movie that everybody knows about, that, like, everybody has talked about at some point. I had higher expectations. And again, I did not read a synopsis on this. I don't know how, in all of my years of watching movies and loving Audrey Hepburn, how I've never, like, seen a synopsis of it. So we went in this, like, pretty completely blind. And I mean, it's definitely good. It's not terrible, and it's not a waste of time, but I've definitely seen a lot of Audrey Hepburn that I like more, you know?
Roman Holiday, she's really good in that, right?
I love Roman Holiday. That one might be my favorite of hers.
There's another movie of hers that's not really something people recognize, like, oh, that's an Audrey Hepburn movie, Wait Until Dark. It's like a thriller where she plays a blind woman. And that movie's, like, super over the top, and it kind of overdoes it, but she's, again, such a big presence that's there. So, yeah, I was expecting maybe more out of Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yeah, it still had, I believe, 5 Oscar nominations at the time, and it won 2 for Best Original Song and then Best Music Score for a dramatic or comedy picture. But Audrey did get a Best Actress nomination, and it was nominated for Best Screenplay, and Best Art Direction, color. So, I mean, it could have... I agree with most of those nominations. I mean, obviously we're not big on, like, the Academy Award nominations of that time, but, I mean, those make sense for me. And I feel like Audrey Hepburn is just such a presence that she could do anything, and you'd probably pay attention to it at least a little bit, you know?
Yeah, and it's... I don't know. This is her iconic look. It's the Breakfast at Tiffany's look.
Yeah, with her big hat and her sunglasses and the black dress.
Holding the cigarette with the little...
Like the long cigarette holder thing.
Yeah, I don't know what that's called. We don't use that anymore, unfortunately. I think we should. If you're going to smoke a cigarette, do it in style. Right. Don't smoke, by the way. But that's the look. That's her look, and this movie was influential, and it was mentioned for so long. I think now it died a little bit. Like, people don't mention it as much, but up until, like, the 90s, maybe the early 2000s, it was mentioned a lot in pop culture.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely, like, an iconic movie, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's not, that there's nothing to
Yeah, it's one of those
about
movie names where that's a movie.
Yeah.
Like, you recognize that as being a movie that exists, like Citizen Kane and, like, Braveheart. It's a movie name that just you recognize as, like, that's a movie everyone watches, or, like, the older generation watch.
Yeah. But it does have, like, some weird things in it that I don't love, you know?
Yeah, it's what keeps you on your toes, though. It's where,
I suppose so.
it comes out of nowhere that, like, oh, she's a country girl, which makes sense.
Right.
But it's the way that it happens where her older husband shows up, and you're like, what the hell's happening right now?
But even, I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about, like, the Mr., what is his name? The Mickey Rooney character.
Oh, right.
Mr. Yunoshi or something like that.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
We watched this, I guess, long enough that I forgot about it. But that's super weird and
not funny, like, at all.
It's just not funny. Like, even if it wasn't a Japanese man playing the role, it still wouldn't be funny because it's just not a funny role to me.
Yeah, that was, like, it was shocking because, like I said, like we said, we didn't really, like, know what to expect going into this. And so, like, you see Mickey Rooney playing a Japanese man,
like
in
a
very, like,
stereotypical
like, a very caricatured version of it, and you're kind of like, that's weird. Maybe it has a purpose. It doesn't, like, at all.
Like, really, if it was a Japanese man, it still wouldn't have a purpose. So it's not even like the character is flawed, even if you don't think it's racist.
Yeah.
Which at the time, less people thought it was racist, but it still got criticism.
Yeah.
Which is weird that he didn't see that, because I think it was like 2008 the last time he mentioned this on the record, where he said, oh, it's a shame that people now think it's bad because I only got praise from Chinese and Japanese people telling me how funny it was.
Yeah.
At the time, it got criticism, and it's just such a weird choice because it's not funny, and the director said he wouldn't do it again. He said if he could cut it out, he would.
Yeah, so it's like that kind of those little, like, interludes, I guess, of that character was kind of threw me off a little bit, and maybe that hindered my enjoyment of it a little bit, and maybe why people don't necessarily talk about it as much anymore.
It could be. They're definitely out of place, and they just don't contribute.
Yeah, and this movie does have a lot of twists, I would say, to a point where it's kind of like anything else you want to add.
Right, but that's kind of what... Because they only start maybe like halfway through the movie. Well, there's smaller twists, like him being a male prostitute, whatever he is.
An escort or something.
Sure, but like the big twist, I think, starts with she's a country girl, her husband's here, but then he kind of just leaves.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, the payoff is that she was a country girl, which makes sense to the character. But the whole thing leading to her us finding it out as viewers feels overblown.
Empty, yeah.
It feels... Sure, empty because it doesn't do much after.
Yeah, there's no, like, real consequences to us, like, caring about that at all, you know? Where
There's
it's like,
definitely a lot of issues to this movie.
and then it's kind of like, oh, he's very much older than her, but they got married when she was 14, and then, like, he's like, just come home and I'll take care of you and I'll take care of your brother. Like,
Yeah.
But
her
I'm not gonna,
brother,
yeah.
mentioning her brother, he dies.
Yeah.
Which is another thing. She throws a fit. The guy that she's dating, the Brazilian guy, gets confused. It's just... And mentioning the Brazilian guy, she's also dating him because he's rich, which goes back to the Marilyn Monroe character in Some Like It Hot.
Yeah, there's a lot of... I was going to mention that kind of towards... While we're wrapping it up, I guess. How many parallels there are between, like, the actresses that played these roles and then, like, the roles that they're playing. So, for example, in Breakfast at Tiffany's, Holly Golightly is her name that she comes up with, but she's really, you know, a country girl that changed her name to try... Like, Lula Mae, that's it. Lula Mae Barnes is her real name. And she kind of invents Holly Golightly to seem more alluring.
I honestly don't understand how that's better than Lula May, but
Holly Golightly is a very, I'd say that does sound like special, you know?
but it kind of sounds country to me. I don't know.
I don't know. I feel like Lula May does sound worse.
Lula May definitely sounds country.
But, you know, the same type of thing happened in All About Eve, where Eve Harrington isn't who she says she is. You know, like she says that she got married and, you know, worked in like a factory with her family or something. But Addison DeWitt kind of exposes her and says that that's not all true, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And she basically... It's the same type of thing where they've kind of reinvented themselves, and for Eve it was kind of more malicious, I suppose.
Right.
Because she's trying to...
And she's not necessarily trying to find a rich man.
Yeah, she's like overtaking somebody else's life, kind of, or trying to whittle her way into...
Well, she tries to take her fiance, boyfriend at the time, so...
Yeah, she tries to take everybody's fiance, boyfriend, husband, you know, She tries to ruin many marriages,
right.
Eve Harrington does. But with Holly Golightly, it's more, she changes herself so that she herself can, you know, change, kind of. Like, she's trying to get a better life for herself, not necessarily trying to hurt people, even though, you know, using some man for his money is not great.
She fully planned to give them the life experience, so... No harm, no foul.
No, she definitely, like, was planning, like, I'll be the best wife that they have.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not about to lose this opportunity type thing.
Right.
Like, when she was gonna move to Brazil, she was gonna learn Portuguese and do her best to kind of...
But it is kind of using the same plot elements to have the woman that's only interested about money dating the guy that doesn't have money at the end.
Mm-hmm. And then it kind of parallels like Marilyn Monroe's life. Like, that's not her name. Marilyn Monroe isn't her name. It is Norma Jean, kind of like Lula May, you know, where she, you know, Marilyn Monroe was in foster homes and orphanages, and she married really young to you know, get out of that situation, and started working as like a pinup model, you know, and then tried to whittle her way into a movie career. So, and I have no idea if Marilyn Monroe was a good person or not. Never met her. Never, you know, she died pretty young. She's only 36. Like, didn't even get to experience a lot of those life milestones. But it's kind of the same type of deal, and I think that a lot of people glamorize this lifestyle or this type of, like...
I mean, they are the definition of glamour. I mean, that's what they wanted to interpret on screen.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that people maybe fall for it.
Yeah.
As an olden trap that was laid by a different generation. But I don't know. If you actually watch the movies, maybe you have a different opinion of what you should glamorize.
Yeah. I don't know.
More than just remembering them as pinups.
Yeah.
And actual talking heads that...
I just think it's interesting, and I just remember very recently reading a book that's pretty popular now. I feel like a lot of people have read it. It's The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo.
That's going to get a Netflix adaptation soon, so if you come back to this episode in some months... Yeah, maybe
we'll watch it.
Yeah, it's going to make more sense.
But it's a book that is basically a story about Evelyn Hugo, who is an old Hollywood star, and her life very parallels a lot of like old Hollywood actresses.
I mean, it has to be based on them.
Where she changes her name and, you know, marries her like next door neighbor to get out of poverty type thing and to get her away and stuff, and then dumps him, and then she uses men strategically to get the things that she wants, and, you know, she was good enough that she did get nominated for Academy Awards in this book, and it's parallels Audrey Hepburn, Marilyn Monroe, Elizabeth Taylor, Katharine Hepburn. There's a lot of women that we could have picked to talk about.
A lot of iconic women at the time, for sure.
And, we just ended up choosing these women because we think that they're a good representation of kind of a wide variety of movies and time periods. Because, Audrey Hepburn is more, I'd say she's more late 50s or into the 60s. Whereas Bette Davis was, in the 30s into the 50s type of thing. Like, she still had, like, a pretty wide career. And then Marilyn, I'd say, is pretty much 50s.
Early 50s until just... Yeah, I mean...
In terms of movie
the
making.
women we pick make sense. If you disagree, you could tell us, but...
It's definitely... I think that these are a good representation.
Yeah, and they're all powerful screen figures, which is what matters, I guess, to the cinephiles, right?
Yeah, because
Audrey Hepburn is just super captivating. I'll watch any movie with her, even if it's crappy, because I think she makes every movie better.
Yeah,
legitimately.
Like, we watched one that I'd say we generally did not like, and it was called Funny Face.
Oh yeah, that movie sucks.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, but she's good.
She's in it. She's good. It's just everything else about it is like not good. I don't know. I don't think it's really well praised, but it was a musical that had Fred Astaire in it as the main lead.
I'm just gonna have to be honest with myself and reach a conclusion. I just don't like Fred Astaire's movies.
Yeah, that's fair. That might be fair enough to say.
Like, Fred Astaire has a lot of movies and they're important in his time, but there's a reason no one tries to copy what Fred Astaire did.
Yeah, and I feel like even though I think that Fred Astaire at the time of Funny Face might have been a bigger name than Audrey Hepburn, or at least had a bigger, like, history, He's I think he is a lot older than her.
Yeah, I mean, they always were. The men were always a lot older than the women.
But Audrey is still the one that I think of when I think of Funny Face, even though I don't like it. But I think it's funny. Get it? Funny Face. Because they say that she has a funny face in the movie. And
she's
I'm
like a librarian or something.
Yeah, and I'm like, if you think Audrey Hepburn has a funny face, like if you want me to sit here and believe that you think Audrey Hepburn has an odd looking face in like a quirky kind of way, like you're
lying to yourself.
You're lying to yourself. It's definitely like not, it wasn't like her earliest movie. I think the one movie that she became really big in was Roman Holiday. I think that's the one
with
that
another man that was way older than her.
Right. But Roman Holiday, I could talk for endless amounts of hours about Roman Holiday.
Different episode though.
And how much I loved it. For sure. I'm not going to sit here and talk about it, but it is like, I'd say something that just made me fall in love with Audrey Hepburn. And, it wasn't the first movie I had seen of her, but it definitely was the movie where I was like, okay, I get it. I get why she's iconic. Because, I think that Audrey Hepburn is a big name. And it's a name that a lot of people think of when they think of classic Hollywood movies.
But again, I think they might think of her as a pinup, as the girl with the sunglasses and the black dress, holding a cigarette, more than a serious actress. Which I think Bette Davis is the only one here that was like, you can look back and be like, that's a very serious actress. While she wasn't a sex symbol really. While you can look at the other two and just, if you're not into movies, just think of them as figures.
Sure. And I'd say even like a non-movie watcher, for example, like when I was in my early teenhood, I had no idea who Bette Davis was. I had no idea who Audrey Hepburn was. I feel like I had vague mentionings of Audrey Hepburn, but didn't have any clue of what she did or like what movies she was in, or if she was even a movie star, or if she was a singer.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things.
Yeah, so I think that once you get into movies, it's very clear that Audrey Hepburn is like a big name to movie making in general. But I think for like the general public, like Marilyn Monroe is always going to be the number one person that you think of. But even still, even when even knowing her name, I would always get confused if she did movies or if she did music. Like if she was a singer,
or if she was like a model, or which she was.
Yeah,
but it's
different because like she did like the presidential Happy Birthday song. So I think that That's like something we kind of talk about in
Yeah.
history class.
She drove men crazy.
Yeah.
One of the best baseball players of all time. Couldn't handle not having her. I mean, she did build her figure on being she did build her whole persona on being a sex symbol. I mean, she's not a blonde. So that was a choice that was made to be more appealing physically.
Yeah.
But I think there was good to her and not just objectifying herself.
Yeah. And I mean, like we've beat the dead horse into the ground where she is like an icon, you know?
Yeah.
They're all icons, I'd say.
Yeah, they're all icons. The movies are all fun.
Yeah, and I'd say we can like kind of, we didn't give our ratings for them, so I think we can kind of like, go over
let's wrap it up with it, yeah.
So for All About Eve, I gave this a 9 out of 10. I think it kind of drags a little bit in the middle where I'm not like as completely captivated, where it's kind of at the point where I feel like I knew that Eve was evil. Mm-hmm. And that she was doing these things on purpose, but the movie was still kind of being coy about it, like, oh, she's just a fan. She didn't know that she was gonna upset you, and you're Margot Channing. Like this is just how you react to things.
But I think I give it a 10 out of 10. But I think that you can look at that as like you're sharing the frustration that Margot is.
Sure.
Instead of like, oh, I think obviously she's the villain. You could just be like, yeah, she's the villain and I'm sharing the same frustration. Especially on a rewatch, definitely you can't be surprised by it.
Right.
So you gotta just share in her pain.
Yeah.
And hate Eve as much as she did.
She is, yeah. And I mean, it definitely could be a 10 out of 10 on a rewatch. You know how I give my 10s. I have to like think about it sometimes. Sometimes I have to rewatch it.
Yeah, this is a movie that wasn't streaming on anything we own.
Yeah. So shout out to our local library.
Yeah, library pulling through on this, but also like the accessibility
is low.
Low right now for us at least. So yeah, go to your library. Yeah. They're stacked. I got a movie there released by Kino Lorber, which Blu-ray collectors will know, but it has like 200 ratings on Letterboxd, and the library just had it on Blu-ray, and I just grabbed it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, go to your library, find good movies there.
Yeah,
and books.
Yeah, but All About Eve was great, and I'm really glad that we watched it. And I will recommend this to people that I know haven't seen it, and we probably would have gotten to it eventually because, I mean, at some point, I'm pretty sure we wanted to go through all of the Academy Award, like, Best Picture winners just to see them. I mean, everyone kind of does that when they get into movies. So definitely on our list. So we would have gotten to it eventually, but I'm really glad that we watched it now, and I will be watching it again.
Yes, 100%. I mean, it's so good.
It's really good.
Again, I will double down and say it's one of the best screenplays of all time.
For sure.
If not one of the best movies of all time, which I also think it is, the screenplay is so good.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. 100%.
But yeah, the other two movies, the ones I wouldn't recommend to people. Not because I think they're bad. I gave Something Like It Hot 8 out of 10.
I gave it a 7 out of 10.
It's a low 8 out of 10. I think it's funny, and I think it's fun, and I think if my brain is turned off, which I know is a joke, but if my brain is turned off, I enjoy it just for the jokes and not anything more serious.
Yeah, it's kind of like a fun movie. It's just a fun time. And if you're a fan of white chicks, like I am, I love white chicks. I haven't seen it in a really long time, but it left a lasting impression on me when I was 6, 7, 8. I was pretty young when I saw it.
I mean, the Terra Cruz memes are still alive and well.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of nice to see the source material, and it wasn't something I was expecting at the time to see because, like we said, just didn't really look into like the plot line of it.
No, that was kind of the point. It was the point of the episode was trying to think of the women of the time, and then what came to mind, we'd pick the movie of theirs that came to mind.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to talk about the representation they had and not necessarily how good an actress they were, how good the movie was, or we're just thinking, who do I think of immediately?
Marilyn Monroe. Which movie do I think of? Some Like It Hot was my immediate reaction.
Boom. That's why we talk about Some Like It Hot and didn't try to look into it more.
Yeah. And it paid off a little bit. Yeah. I wouldn't say I'd say I'd tell people to watch this if they're trying to watch like all the Billy Wilders.
Billy Wilder has a lot better movies.
Yeah.
Like legitimately, like even if I gave this an 8 out of 10, which is the higher rating, he has better movies. We watched The Apartment right after because we still had a lot of the night going on, so we just put it on, and that was just so much better.
Yeah, for sure. But, you know, I would recommend it to people that want to complete like a Billy Wilder, or if they want to see all the Marilyn Monroe like movies. It's not a bad film. I just wouldn't tell people to expect a lot out of it.
Yeah, but it's not
highbrow.
It's no Double Indemnity or Sunset Boulevard for sure, but it's still very good.
And then for Breakfast at Tiffany's, I wanted to like it more than I did, and this also got a 7 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, for me too.
It was okay. And
I think the expectations kind of killed it for us.
It definitely did, because I've seen Audrey Hepburn movies, which I love.
Yeah, it's what I'm saying. I thought this would be the Audrey Hepburn, and it's just not, and I think maybe that kind of hit me wrong at the time.
Yeah, I think so.
Of course, I still think the movie's good, but it has too many issues for me to love, and it's not on Audrey.
No, because she still does an amazing job, and I think that she still captivates the screen, and that's enjoyable to watch. But yeah, I think that when I thought about this movie, I thought like this is going to be her best role, and it really wasn't for me. I've seen her in, we've seen her in Charade. And I've seen
a lot of people say like, oh, I love Breakfast at Tiffany's. Imagine how good it could be if it wasn't racist. So that also would immediately kind of kill it for me, because those segments are just not funny.
They're not funny, and they kind of bum me out a little bit.
They kind of make me cringe, like, what are you thinking? So that would immediately kind of kill it.
Yeah.
But there's other things. I just think it kind of does too much with it. But there's a lot of moments that are enjoyable, and it's the moments that Audrey's on screen doing her thing.
But I do get a little frustrated now when I see comments or like reviews of like, she didn't even have Breakfast at Tiffany's. It's that's literally the first like sequence.
It's how it opens. She's eating like a croissant outside of Tiffany.
Yeah, looking at the window. Like she's definitely there. She's definitely having breakfast at Tiffany's.
It immediately starts with like implying that even at breakfast she's thinking about the glorious life she could have if she had the money. Yeah. That's the point, I think, of the opening scene. She's eating her food, starting her day, immediately thinking, if I married a rich man, I could be inside of the store.
Instead of, like, eating a croissant outside of the store.
So, if you missed her having breakfast at Tiffany's, it's right outside of Tiffany's.
She's doing it. She definitely had the breakfast. But I think that's pretty much all that we had for this episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave us a comment, and, just follow our journey as we do more thematic episodes. So we will see you guys next time.